All right, good morning. What you're being asked to do today for physics is basically some time to work on your project. So I just want to talk to you about that real quick. So I'm going to go through this page here that I posted, and if you're looking for it, if you go into Schoology, it should be listed in your timeline. E-learning project Workday, because that's what you're going to do. So you can get to this document here. There's nothing to turn in today. It's just time to work on your project. So things for you to think about today. I encourage you, so there is no requirement that you have a PowerPoint or a poster, but generally speaking, I think that it's probably a good idea that you have one because it helps you do your presentation. So you can go ahead and get started on that today. Here are some things to make sure you've done. Make sure you've turned in your sources. Those were due last Friday, so if you haven't turned those in, make sure to get those turned in. Make sure that in your presentation, whether that's a PowerPoint or a poster, those APA citations make it in there. Otherwise, it's plagiarism. So just make sure your APA citations make it in there. If you're building something, it can just be on a separate sheet of paper, but your APA citations have to be somewhere. As you're doing the project, make sure that you know it well enough that you can explain it in your own words and that you can answer questions about it. Make sure that you're covering the physics of the topic, not just the history or the biography. This is especially important if you've got a scientist or if you've got something with historical significance like the atomic bomb or something. Make sure in the end, right, your presentation is going to want to be between 5 to 7 minutes. And then what I would like to talk to you about here is have you included your visual, right? So, like I said, it's not strictly speaking required that you have a PowerPoint or a poster, but it is required that you have a visual aid, right? That's separate from your PowerPoint, which I might call your presentation aid. A visual aid is an image, a graph, diagram, or a picture, something that helps us understand your topic. For example, if you have a picture of Albert Einstein, that doesn't count as a visual aid, right? That doesn't help us understand anything, right? It just tells us what it looks like. But if you have a diagram of something that Albert Einstein discovered, like the photoelectric effect, that would be an example. Your visual should be something you've made, not just a Google image. It can be based off of something you found, but you should have done something to make it your own. And if you have used a Google image in it, it should be cited. If you've built something, so for those of you who are building a Rubik's Cube or building a radio or whatever, that is your visual. You don't necessarily need an additional visual. And then make sure that you can explain your visual during your project. I just want to show you I took some picture of some example visuals from the past. I went from a very simple visual to a more complicated visual. So here's a simple visual I found. This person was researching the Big Bang, and this is just a timeline. And when she was presenting, she talked through like what each of these areas were. But that's an example of visual. It's very simple. She made it on her own. She made it on PowerPoint, but that meets the requirement for visual. Here's one that's an example of this person started with a Google document or a Google image. So behind there, that's an image she found on Google, and then she cited it correctly, right? But then she added these annotations to it, right? So she did something to make this her own. So that's another example of visual. Here's someone that somebody did. She painted something, and it's a very well done painting. But obviously, I'm not grading necessarily that you're a good painter. But what she has here is she's got a diagram of how a telescope works that she put on this painting. So that was an example. Here's sort of a more like traditional example on a poster board. This person is doing how tornadoes form, but this is kind of a timeline, but it's also got a nice diagram of what's happening. Here's a really neat one. I can't remember who did this, but I found this when I was looking for things in the back. But this person was doing Northern Lights, and you can actually find this image, something very similar to it on Google, but she made it her own, and she kind of labeled things and everything like that. So those are some examples of visuals. Other examples I've seen of visuals is one time I had someone, last year I had someone do something about the physics of skateboarding, and he had videos of himself doing tricks on the skateboard and then explaining that. That would count as visual. What else have I had? I've had situations where someone's built a model. So like I just threw it away because I had it for years. It was a really great, well done model of a nuclear power plant that was made out of styrofoam and everything. That was really neat. So there's all kinds of things you can do with it. But like I said, you can go from simple to more and more complex, right? If you look at the rubric, minimum requirements get you, I think it's a 12 out of 15. So this would be like a 12 out of 15 on just the visual part of the rubric. But kind of if you do something, so this person could still get an A if the other parts of her project, like she described it really well, right? But it would be a 12 out of 15 visual because it met the minimum requirements. If you did something like this where you're really putting some effort into it, that's how you get more than a 12 out of 15 on the visual. Let me go back real quick to so be thinking about your visual aid. Be starting your presentation today. And the only thing is just read through this before you go through this. If you'd like to change projects, you may change projects if somebody else doesn't have your project, but you have to do that by the end of the week. This is especially important if you're building something. So for those of you who are building a Rubens tube or a radio or an electromagnet, if at the end of this week you're still signed up for that, that's what I'm expecting, right? And if you don't get it built, right, your grade will be reflected accordingly. So if building something seems like it's more than you bargained for, you should change projects today. All right. If you got any questions, please feel free to email me. And like I said, there's nothing that I need collected today. Just go ahead and spend some time working on this project. All right. Enjoy your day.